Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Environmental Justice Now. I'm Faith Harris. Virginia IPL's Executive Director, and today we will speak on a subject increasingly on the minds of people everywhere across the state and really across the country. Before we start today, I'd like to do a brief land acknowledgement. We want to remind ourselves that we gather on the unceded land of the indigenous peoples. I'm currently in Richmond, Virginia, which is the land of the Powhatan people. Oftentimes you hear people pronounce it Powhatan. So we think it's important to acknowledge that all the land in both North and South American continents, was originally inhabited by people and cultures who, due to colonialism, have been either eradicated or displaced. And we can trace the current crisis of climate change and environmental injustices to the eradication of people and cultural ways of caring for land, and for the ways in which ecosystems have been uprooted and displaced also as a result of the colonialist impulse that we are still dealing with today. And if you are unsure whose land you are on and want to find out, you can visit native-land.ca to find out. That's native-land.ca, and you can find the land and the original inhabitants of the land where you are currently residing. Again, our discussion will focus on a growing concern in Virginia across the country, data centers. Data centers are specialized facilities designed to house computer systems and associated components, such as telecommunications and storage systems, where large amounts of data are processed, stored, and distributed. Unfortunately, they have some very alarming environmental implications. And also, most people don't really know what data centers do and see these large buildings and infrastructure, but are unsure of what's happening behind the walls. And so here to talk about it with us today is Ann Bennett of the Virginia chapter of the Sierra Club. And to introduce a little bit about Ann and give you a little background about her, she is a native of Fairfax County. And she's worked for many years on Capitol Hill on a range of environmental issues, including the protection of public lands, the National Estuary Program, and is especially proud to have been part of a successful efforts to preserve lands in Southeast Alaska and national park sites in Virginia. Ann has held numerous leadership positions in the nonprofit sector, with a particular interest in leadership, government, and strategic planning, and continues to serve on numerous boards. She was chair of the Fairfax County Non-Motorized Trails Transportation Committee. Currently, she is land use chair of the Sierra Club Great Falls group and is building Sierra Club Virginia chapter data center campaign. She earned a BA in history from the University of Virginia and has a master's in environmental resource policy from George Washington University. Thank you and welcome, Ann. Thank you for joining us today. And so after giving you a little bit of background on your work and the Sierra Club, let's jump right into some of the questions. Tell us, Ann, what are data centers? Tell us more about what data centers are. And why they're necessary, or why we're seeing so many crop up in Virginia.
Well, Faith, thanks. First of all, thank you for having me, and I really appreciate your interest in what is, both an issue now, but even more of an emerging issue, since we are just seeing the, maybe phase one complete of this data center build out in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Data, ever since we, started to work with phones and, early email and all of that, data and data storage have become a much bigger part of our lives. And, the work world, and just the way we obviously do business and communicate with each other. So we used to store that data in our homes generally. We would have some sort of backup here, in a room or in an office, but that is increasingly outsourced now to what we often call the cloud, right? Well, the cloud is, you talked about the lands in Virginia. The cloud is, for the most part, located on the ground in the land in Virginia, and not in the sky, and in other states as well. But we do have the distinction of seeming to have 70% of the world's data flow through Northern Virginia in particular right now, although that is going downstate as well. So, these are large industrial facilities. Frankly, they are power plants because they have backup power, which is most commonly fueled by diesel fuel generators. So they can run on that backup power, which of course is one of the issues of concern on the environmental and health protection side. But these are massive buildings and they are getting bigger. They used to be small. They used to not take up as much land. They used to not require quite as much energy. But we are hearing more and working more in this space because they are now becoming what's called hyperscaled. So they are much taller, much bigger, requiring far more energy, far more water resources. An important part of the communications world, no question. I think part of it is how much is enough and how much of it is enough in Virginia. And, when will we sort of meet our limit from a natural resource point of view? But, but they hold computer servers that process and store, as you said, and send data off to all parts of the world.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. That's very helpful to give us a grounding and a better sense of what data centers are, what they do. Can you tell us a little bit, do you have an idea of how many we already are hosting in Virginia?
So I think my estimate is that we probably have around 300 data centers. And many of them, again, are the smaller, older facilities. But now what they're building are these far larger. So it's almost helpful as well to look at the square footage. How big are they? How much power will they require? But we have probably around 300. Most of them are in Northern Virginia. But we are expecting hundreds more throughout Virginia.
Wow.
And so far, we are expecting them at least in 28 jurisdictions within the state.
Wow, that's alarming for many of us who are not, haven't been paying attention.
Yeah.
So this is becoming a bigger issue in among the environmental sector. And can you give us a few of the reasons why the environmental community is concerned about, the concerns that data centers will have on the environment? Tell us a little bit about the energy use and the water and some of the other things that have created kind of an alarm among the community.
Right. So I think as you mentioned, energy is a huge one. Water, land use in terms of how nearby residents are protected, and of course, air pollution from the diesel generators. But I'll start with energy. That is something, we have been concerned about as the newer applications for artificial intelligence become more predominant and more resourced by corporations and individuals. And as we know, this came on sort of very quickly in the last year, let's say. And so part of the rush to site so many buildings is to ensure that artificial intelligence applications can be, developed and sold, to clients. So unfortunately, artificial intelligence makes the servers in the data centers run much hotter. So they pull far more energy than the older data centers. So I sort of say, post 2022, we really are talking about a much different industry and much higher impacts. And that's why, sort of we're here having this conversation today. At least 10%, maybe I've seen estimates as much as 50% more energy is required to service AI. So while, we've heard the sort of benefits of AI touted and all of that, and of course we've heard a lot about the investment opportunity in data centers, there are real costs, and those costs are driving us back to fossil fuel. And where we know now that coal plants in West Virginia, their lives have been extended in order to feed through Maryland and into Loudoun County specifically to service the data centers. All of the increased energy demand in Virginia is due to data centers. And Dominion right now, 21% Dominion's load goes to data centers right now, and it is expected to go to 40% of Dominion's energy to this one industry. And so we're worried about natural gas, increased use of natural gas, obviously the coal, and the carbon implications of not continuing to green the grid. Wow. So in terms of the water, this is really an emerging issue because the servers run hotter. The older conventional industry standard of air cooling is less effective. So companies are turning to cooling methods that require more water. And since the data center campuses, and they are becoming campuses, are moving into areas where there are water issues or drought concerns, that as a resource, particularly in the Rappahannock area, even here in the Occoquan, real concerns about how much water should be allocated to the data center industry. And we're talking about millions of gallons a day. So, and this is really something we don't have enough data to fully understand it, but the data we have is impressive in terms of the numbers. And we know from other states as well that water is under pressure from this industry. So those are the two major ones that we're concerned about, but the diesel emissions we're concerned about potentially, and the land use when the industrial uses come up against residents.
Wow. So it's almost a triumphant of the problems that the sector is concerned about.
Seems to have a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
A lot of everything.
So one other question on this issue of the increase of data centers and AI. What do you think, or what concerns are there about what this impact of the increase of not just the numbers increasing, but also the increase in energy use? What impact do you believe that will have on the grid, and therefore, and then also secondarily on ratepayers? Do you see or foresee any challenge to how our rates may either be impacted negatively or positively because of the demand, energy demand that data centers pose for the grid?
Yeah, so I think we're already seeing an enormous new investment in transmission, in substations, in all sorts of infrastructure. We have the Chesterfield effort to to cite and approve the natural gas plant. We have the West Virginia coal plant. So all of that infrastructure we know is now happening. We thought it would, but it's a reality now. And so those costs are borne by the ratepayers.
Mm-hmm.
So this build out is for these private companies to service their clients. This is not just for Netflix. This is not just for AT&T. They've had their facilities and their data storage and transferability for a long time. These are new applications that are driving the industry. So we are going to be asked to pay for a good portion of that. And that's why we're very, very concerned about the impact on low and moderate ratepayers. And Dominion has said that its rates will go up and perhaps even double. And that's before this, the build out to the extent that it is occurring right now.
Wow.
And we also subsidize them at the state level with tax subsidies. So Amazon and Microsoft and Google and QTS and other massive corporations that are here already doing business, we kind of pay them now to stay in business here. Mm-hmm. So I think that's, it's sort of a double whammy.
Yeah, thank you so much for helping make that connection, because I'm not sure people recognize the ways that we underwrite, or we as taxpayers actually support, and our funds go either through taxes and through the rates we pay, support industry making millions and billions of dollars, but we don't necessarily see that benefit come directly back to our communities, as well as the fact that we're paying more for the energy that we use as a result of their existence.
Right.
So what can we do? Given the demand and given the reality that we know, industries, companies everyone seems to be very excited about AI, excited about all the ways AI will, change our lives. What do we as ratepayers, as consumers, as residents of the state, as people who care about air quality, water accessibility, and our land use, how do we combat this? What do we do?
I mean, it's not easy, both because it's complicated and there are all three levels of government involved at some, part of the process. But I think the most important thing right now is for Virginians to talk to their city council people, their local county supervisors, their delegates and state senators, and even the Congress people and the Senators Warner and Kane, to let them know that you are aware of it. You see this as a massive potential risk to public health and human health and our pocketbooks, and that they need to be doing something. I won't say more, because very little has happened to protect residents and our pocketbooks. And as I said, we're just getting started, because we really only have probably a sixth of the full build out yet. So they really need to know that that this is coming, and potentially rubbing up against neighborhoods. And, there are risks involved with this and costs. So I think that your ability, or anyone's ability, to press that issue, educate them. They have only heard the positive side, right? Which is, oh, we need the local property tax, and we're getting, all this economic development. It is not a jobs program, although there are some labor jobs and some construction jobs, obviously, associated with it. But as a given the amount of money being, invested here, we're really talking about thousands of permanent jobs. That's it so far. So it's
I'm sorry.
closer.
Do you mean, you said there were about 300? Are you saying there was how many jobs?
So I'll just say that when Amazon made the deal with the state to come in and build all these data centers, they were required to ensure that they would bring 1,000 jobs. Okay, these data centers do not need to employ very many people.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, in terms of long-term jobs, it is not the most effective jobs program that we could have.
Mm-hmm.
They are power plants that run with very few people on site, but they do run 24/7.
Yeah.
Which
Okay.
is why they're so costly from a natural resource point of view.
Yeah, and oftentimes that's the first thing that communities are, sold on, that, oh, this is going to bring jobs to your community. And then many times we recognize, not just in this around this issue, but many times whenever a polluting industry wants to do some kind of building infrastructure or increase or expand, that's one of the things they use to silence opposition. And oftentimes those jobs are either few, as you've indicated, or highly technical, and the communities where they're citing these industries don't have those kinds of skills resident among them. And so they're bringing in new people from outside of the community to take these jobs. And therefore, it still does not benefit the community. In fact, it becomes a burden on the community because of the land use and the increased emissions, as well as the water use. So it's really important to paint the full picture for people on a lot of these issues. We recognize that progress is going to happen. We recognize that we need to find ways to live in peace and alignment with industry, but we can't continue to sit silently as we see more and more increase going the opposite direction of mitigating climate change. In fact, increasing the actual causes of it. So I want. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add that we have the Virginia Clean Economy Act that does require us to continue to make progress on cleaning the grid. And I would, I think, your members really could ensure at the state level that they stand behind that bill, because that is the law of the land, to continue to green that. So I think that's another important point to be able to make.
Yeah, and we're really at the point where we're recognizing that much of the energy sector has not begun to even meet their own standards or deliverables on reaching the 2050 goals. So that's a major concern for us, and we do need to ensure that people understand the VCEA, understand why it's so important, and understand why all of these, all of the we're not always easily, these are complex issues and they're not always easily understood. And it's very easy for, just the regular general public to get confused by the noise and the narrative that's been driven, that there's like a better tomorrow as a result of these data centers, or as a result of AI, or as a result of the work that the tech sector. But I think it's really important that our people that are listening and who are interested in learning more, give us some ideas of what we can do next. How can people get more deeply involved in understanding data centers, but also understanding what's going on in their own region?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have some materials that we can share with people working in specific localities in case, for instance, a particular county takes up a zoning ordinance issue. And so we have some, particularly at the local level, we can definitely share materials if somebody, sees a big campus coming their way.
Yeah. I think another, and we're almost at the end, so we're going to be wrapping up. But one final question, and it's really something that we didn't cover in any of the other questions, is the use of the data that's being collected and housed and stored in these data centers. Are there concerns about how this data is being used? Does the public understand, fully enough about AI and how the cloud works for them to really feel a sense of cybersecurity, if you will?
So, and this is a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but it's a hugely important issue. I mean, I think what I will say is that if you look at the history of tech, it has gone virtually unregulated, period. So Congress never regulated the internet and really gave them protections. There haven't been major privacy bills passed, even though there have been attempts, and I think there may even be one in the Senate, the US Senate right now. Artificial intelligence has not been regulated. Obviously, its larger applications are new, but AI has been around for a while. And now, we have, what I call the underbelly of the industry, which are the data centers, and they have gone virtually unregulated. And that's what we're trying to change, so that, tech is accountable both to the resource issues, but of course the privacy issues. There have been many reports about intellectual property challenges to AI. And I can't tell you what each of these private companies does with its data. There is literally no transparency in the data center industry, and no benchmarking, and no public understanding of how much resources are being used by our utilities. We have a long way to go to fully understand how, what is actually at play. And that's why we need everybody on the ground, really, as partners to protect all of us.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Ann. We're at the end of our time now, but I am so grateful for just this little bit, this little short, brief conversation. We've learned a great deal from you already. And we will be continuing to be in conversation with you on this issue, because we're hearing from people who are partnering with us, people who are our base, who are very concerned about this issue and want to learn more, want to be able to know how to speak to their state, to their legislators, but also to speak to their community members about what's actually happening with data centers. And I'm just really grateful that we have access to somebody with the level of knowledge and competency that you have on this issue. So thank you again for joining us today. We will have further conversations with you later on in the year, and I know there will be legislation this year that we will want to consider supporting and/or even helping to craft to address this issue. You've raised some really important ways that our base and our members and our organization can get involved. And so thank you again so much, Ann. Do you have any final words that you want to say before we sign off? We have 30 seconds.
I just want to say that first, it's a pleasure to be with you, and the fact that you've raised this issue is important, because I do think it is the emerging issue for the environment, because it really touches on pretty much every aspect of our quality of life and protecting the land and sky and seas around us, literally. So thank you, and we look forward to working together.
Okay, thank you so much, Ann.
Take care.
Bye-bye now.